Nerdy Romantics. Y'all, I'm so excited. I have with me Geneva Lee, and she is the author of the Filthy Rich Vampire Series. And now coming up this month, she is going to have a new series out called Filthy Rich Fae. All right, Filthy Rich Fae. Y'all, this book was totally awesome. If you loved Filthy Rich Vampire and that series, you will totally love Filthy Rich Fae because I love it. And I can't wait for book 2 already. How about that? No pressure, Geneva.
No pressure. I've started to get threats.
Uh-oh. Well, that won't be from me. But for those of you who are living in a cave somewhere and don't know who Geneva is, she is a New York Times, USA Today, and international best-selling author who writes books about recovering alpha males and the strong women who bring them to their knees. Her best-selling Royal Saga has sold nearly 4 million copies worldwide. Wow. Amazing.
Yeah, crazy.
And her work has been featured in Writer's Digest, Publishers Weekly, Redbook, Cosmopolitan, People, NPR, and the New York Times Book Review. Geneva might travel at any time. Dreams of a Paris apartment. Oh, you know I'm going to ask you about that, right? And spends her days raising her kids with her soulmate and an ever-growing collection of cats.
Yes.
Oh my.
Cats.
Okay, so everybody tune in. We are going to talk Filthy Rich Fae, Filthy Rich Vampires, romantasy, all the wonderfulness with Geneva Lee when we come back. This is the Nerdy Romantics Podcast, and I'm your host, Y.M. Nelson. Welcome to Nerdy Romantics Podcast, Ms. Lee.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm so excited to have you here. I have to say this before we even get started. I have been, of course, hearing so much about romantasy and the genre and what it is, and everybody's just loving these books that are considered romantasy. But I had not read, I should say, because I don't write romantasy, but I have not read any romantasy until your book.
Really?
You are my inauguration into this genre. And I must say, is it all about fairies doing bad things? Is this what I've been missing?
A healthy margin of it is.
Okay. All right. So it's true what they say.
I definitely think so.
So it's true what they say. This is a fairy smut kind of world we're in.
Mm-hmm. I think it is. Yeah. Yeah. These books are kind of like urban romantasy is a term that we've been kind of coining to talk about them.
Okay.
In-house. But yeah, I started reading romantasy a couple years back, probably 6 or 7 years ago, and it took over my reading life. And I finally got to the point where I was like, I'm just going to start writing some of this.
Yeah. So, technically, I guess Filthy Rich Vampires is considered paranormal romance and not necessarily romantasy. So it's you're not moving very far, on the spectrum. But I wanted to ask you, how did you even get in this world anyway? I mean, what made you want to write paranormal romance, romantasy, all the things?
So when I started writing romance, I started with a series called The Royal Saga, which is, this is going to be shocking, about royalty. And it is contemporary romance with the British royal family. And so I was kind of looking for, I've done a few other trilogies like Royals. I released a 13th book in that series last year. Like it's long running.
Mhm.
But I was kind of always on the lookout for what is my next like big project that I'm really going to devote years of my life to, because the first Royals book came out 10 years ago this weekend.
Wow.
So I was writing in that series for a decade. And so I knew that I wanted to do another really long running big world series. And I had been saying to my agent, who I count as one of my close friends, for several years, that I really wanted to write adult Twilight, that I wanted something that like was really vampires for adults with a heavy, heavy, heavy focus on the romance. And so I talked about that. It was kind of a put up or shut up moment where
Yeah.
she's like, how many years am I going to listen to you talk about this series that you're going to write? But I really did spend probably 5 years making notes for how's the magical system going to function, and collecting little like lines of dialogue that would just pop into my head, and really just thinking about and just waiting for the moment where the characters really appeared to me fully fledged and I had the sort of hook of the story. But, I came out of contemporary romance. And
Mhm.
so, just from a purely commercial marketing standpoint, I was asking my readers to make a leap from contemporary romance into paranormal or into romantasy. Because the trick with Filthy Rich Vampires is really that it starts off like a paranormal romance and then it leans into the fantasy more and more with each book.
Yeah.
So you get to see more of this magical world sort of like unlayering in front of you. But I've been writing all of these notes, and I've been saying for years I was going to write Twilight for adults, Twilight with sex, basically. And
Mhm.
then one day the moment was right, and I knew exactly what brought these two together. And it was this sort of idea of the fake dating. Like he just doesn't, he's being pulled out from his sleep. He's been asleep for over 30 years because he has said basically, I don't want to even be woken up or deal with people anymore. Like, wake me up when the world is over.
Right. Wake me
Um,
when the
and he
world
gets woken
ends.
up instead, being told, hey, you have to wake up and get married
Right.
because of vampire tradition. And he's like, you know what I really don't want to do? Get married. So he just stumbles across this human very early on in the book that he's drawn to for some reason, and he thinks it's going to be a great plan, because isn't that what a fake dating story always
Of
is?
course.
It'll be a great plan. Nothing could possibly go wrong
Right.
if we just pretend like we're dating, and I won't have to get married, and I'll pay off your mom's medical bills and your student loans. So I just was like, there it is. That's the fantasy right now. That's the fantasy for me as a woman. A vampire just walked in, a 900-year-old vampire just walked into my life and said, I'm going to pay off all of your debt and take you on a like world tour. Can you pretend to be my girlfriend for a year? I'm like, sign me up. I'm already packed.
Yep.
It just kind of, it's like one of those things where once it started, it just kept snowballing into a bigger world and there were more magical creatures involved. But it was kind of a slow burn getting into it, of just taking my time with this project and taking my time with this project.
Mm. Were you writing Royals books while you were taking your time with this project?
I was, yeah. I wrote several Royals books, and even the last Royals book came out last year in the middle of the ebook releases of the Filthy Rich Vampire series. So, I mean, I
Wow.
was, the whole time I was still writing Royals, and it kind of said, I think that's the last book. And everyone, I think, kind of is,
Oh.
they don't believe me because I had
Okay.
said book seven was the last book many years ago. And
Oh.
then
Okay.
Harry and Meghan happened. And I was like, well, these characters have something to say.
Exactly. They're talking to
So
you
yeah,
again.
so I was definitely still writing Royals during that time.
Hmm.
I feel like I'll always be writing royals.
Oh, yeah, I was going to say for those, and I am going to put myself into that category because, again, I have just been introduced to romantasy, and I've just been introduced to you through this, through Filthy Rich Fae and Filthy Rich Vampires. So, is there a connection between the royals, even though they're contemporary romance, because Filthy Rich Vampires, they're royalty too? I mean, is there a
So
world
funny.
connection
So
there?
for a long time, I kept saying that I wanted to take one character in the Royals and turn them into a vampire, and I'm still saying I might do it because I think this character. Those who've read the Royals who are listening, like I think Georgia would make an excellent vampire. I totally see that for her, but I haven't like done that for sure. However, when Entangled picked up Filthy Rich Vampires, we went back through and we did another round of edits, of course, to be on their style sheet. And it was really very funny because I don't remember which book it's in, but there's a reference, I think it's book 4, there's a reference to the King of England, which at the time that that was written, there was
No
no
King
King
of
of
England.
England.
Yeah.
So it was an Easter egg for people that have read the Royals that this is taking place in this same world as the Royals, and all of my books take place in the same world.
Mm-hmm.
And so no characters have really crossed over yet. There's been hints, but there was that reference. But the editors last year are going, you can't say that the King of England is sexy. And I was like, my King of England is sexy.
Right, in my
I
world.
grant you that most people are not out there being like, Charles.
Right.
I'm like, but you have to understand there was no King of England. So we had to
Exactly.
like clarify that. Yeah, I think it now. I think it might actually say King Alexander in the 4th book now. I don't remember how we fixed that, but yeah. So there is that link to it, and I always wanted to sort of have that moment of where we fully see a crossover and we see a character crossover that because I love doing that. I love to have little Easter egg cameo appearances in all my
Yeah.
contemporary romances. So never say never, it could happen.
Oh, all
And
right.
I would expect to see lots of crossover in Filthy Rich Fae and Filthy Rich Vampires. And then we have a couple other Filthy Rich shoot offs that we'll probably be doing at some point. So
Mm-hmm.
I expect those characters to always be crossing in and out.
Yeah. As I was reading Filthy Rich Fae, I was like, she gave me an Easter egg here back to Filthy Rich Vampires, which we won't talk about that. I don't want to spoil it, but I was like, okay,
Oh
here's a
yeah, there's
little
Easter eggs, and there's
Easter egg.
already
Yeah.
yeah, there's crossover with book 4. One of a character in Filthy Rich Vampires is a main character, like a big secondary character in Filthy Rich Fae. So
Mm-hmm.
I kind of already planted all of that. The Entangled said, "Do we should go in and do some?" I was like, "You think I didn't already do that?
Right.
I'm all over that."
Exactly.
This
Got
is
that
my
in the
sexy
bag.
Marvel verse. Thank you very much.
Yes. Yes.
Like this is what women need.
All right, everybody, you heard it. She said Marvelverse. We have now knighted you. You are now a nerdy romantic. Yes, you are
Yes.
in. I love it. I love it all. You know, I want to talk. I wanted to talk to you a little bit more about Filthy Rich Vampires, which we'll come back to that. But we do have a few writers that also listen, maybe more than a few. But it made me want to, as you were talking about the Royal series and then talking about how ideas percolate and everything like that, I wanted to go back to how you started, just how you started writing in general. What made you want to go that route with royals and or just even be in the romance genre? What made you want to do this crazy mixed up
Well,
life?
I have a very sort of twisted early career. I mean, I have a very crazy career period. I actually started in young adult. And so my first 3
Ah.
books were a young adult series with New York. And I remember a moment when I think it was book 2. And there was a scene in this young adult, like it was a young adult dystopian trilogy that came out, started in circa 2012. So that totally tracks
Yes.
if you know your history, like
Yes.
what a surprise. There was a young adult dystopian trilogy. And there was a scene in the second book where the love interest kind of like pushes her up against a wall and kisses her. I think that at all ages that girls and women can get behind this, and it wasn't an aggressive, like
Right.
it was a passionate kiss. But my editor, I remember her saying, God, you write a lot of kissing scenes. Maybe you should think about writing romance in an offhanded remark.
Oh,
And,
wow.
I talk pretty openly about that series. It's published under a different name, but it's no secret. It's very easy to find this information out. But I talked very openly about the series and the fact that that series was set up to be the next Hunger Games, like literally, like Comic-Con, big New York trade shows. Everyone's saying this is going to be the next Hunger Games, and I'm over there banging my head against the table, going, "Don't have any pressure." And I am comfortable in saying that that series crashed and burned so
It did it.
yeah, so while I'm writing this YA series and like keeping up with sort of the pressures of New York and pressures of going on book tour and whatnot, in the back of my mind, it's kind of percolating the whole time that I should maybe write romance novels. Because at the same time that I'm doing all of this travel and you're stuck in airport bookstores and things like that, I finally picked up 50 Shades of Grey because it was everywhere, right? So the year
Hmm.
that I published my first book, that was the book. 2012, that was the book, was 50 Shades of Grey. And everyone was reading about it, everyone was talking about it in New York. And I remember just reading it and thinking, that I've always loved erotic literature. I'm what's considered ABD. I'm all but dissertation for my doctorate in English literature. And my specialty was very specifically sort of history of erotic literature.
Wow.
And so I've been obsessed with like studying this for years. And so when 50 Shades of Grey happened and suddenly we're mainstreaming erotic romance, it was really exciting for
Hmm.
me from this intellectual, like no one cares. Like they're like, this is what you want to talk about this. And I'm like, yes, I do. I'm so excited. So it just was in the back of my head, like maybe I should be writing something like this. Maybe it would be fun. And as it became like more clear that this YA trilogy wasn't really doing very well, I was like, well, you know what? I'm going to dip my toes into self-publishing and I'm going to learn how to market myself and do my own publicity and write my own books and work with editors and really know the business from the inside out in a
Hmm.
way that when you immediately start publishing with New York, you don't necessarily get
Yeah.
because they're doing everything for you, and they're handling all of these things. And that's really wonderful. And it's such a privilege, but also, ew, for better or for worse, when you're with New York, there's a sense of, this was your book's moment, and if it didn't work out, then we have to move on to the next book, and that's
Wow.
just the reality of it. But of course, your own interest in that book doesn't go away. You still want
Right.
to see it succeed. And so I was like, let's learn how to do this. So I decided I will adopt a pen name and start writing romance novels. And that worked out really well for me to the point where I've never gone back and written another YA. I've never, I think I had a different agent at the time who was also a lovely human and I love her. We still get along famously, but I think at some point we both went, "You're not going to write YA again, are you?" And I was like, "I am probably not." Like, never say never, but
Yeah.
so I kind of stumbled into it, but that's how I got started writing romance. How I just got started writing was basically that I kept talking about how I wanted to write a novel, and I actually went to grad school because this is very laughable and any academic listening. I apologize. It was doe-eyed naivety. I remember thinking, well, I'll just stay in school and I'll go to college and I'll work on writing a novel while I'm in grad school teaching a couple courses
Yeah.
every
Uh-huh.
semester and taking classes, and there was not a lot of writing that was happening.
Right.
So I ended up leaving grad school, had my second baby, and my mother-in-law called me and said, "I demand that you write a novel." And I was so annoyed by it that I immediately went out and started doing that. So that worked out very well. And she made that phone call a year later. I had a book deal. So I just really just decided I'm going to do this.
Amazing.
I'm going to write a book. And for those of you that listen to the podcast because you want to hear like the inspirational story or the like behind the scenes, how did this work? Like that is all I did. I remember at the time Stephanie Meyer had a really robust website where she had a blog, and I hope that's still live because she talked about the process, everything from the initial kernel of the idea to mailing the that's how old we are, to mailing out like query letters through the mail.
Yes.
And so I devoured as much of that information as I could and just basically said, okay, I'm a stay-at-home mom during the day. I take care of the kids and I do as much research as I can about publishing. And then at night I go and I write at the library.
Wow. Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Yeah.
That is an awesome story. I love the role that your mother-in-law plays in this. How about that?
I know that first book is dedicated to her. It's dedicated to her and my husband. I think it was like to Robin, who demanded I write a book, and to Josh, who made it happen. Because I am very fortunate. I have a husband that is my first reader. I always say he's my target audience. I want to entertain him. And he reads them all. He loves them. So,
awesome.
Yeah.
I love that. I love that whole story. And something that resonated with me, because I kind of felt the same way at one point when I was querying the book that is now on my shelf and hopefully will not remain there forever, but
sometimes those projects, right?
We'll see what happens. But I kind of have that same feeling. I said, I'm going to, go back to school and write, and then maybe I'll teach a class or two or something like that. Oh gosh,
I know, because it was just like, oh, I can do that while I'm also teaching writing to freshmen in college. You know what you're always doing? You're just reading other people's terrible essays. No offense,
right.
Sorry, kids. A couple of you could write.
I'm there now. I am there now.
Multiple drafts of other people's work going, I don't have any energy for this.
Exactly. Yes.
So,
I am there now. I am tired of essays and maybe even a little bit tired of my own writing.
I know I had this hot minute after Royals did really well where I was like, okay, I'm gonna take a break. I'm like, should I go back to grad school and finish my degree? And everyone around me is like, have you lost your mind? That's what you're gonna do for your break, is go finish your PhD.
That's not a break, hon.
Write
That's
a dissertation.
not a break.
I didn't do it. I was always just always a little annoyed with myself for leaving it unfinished.
It's always kind of on my radar to get my doctorate, and I just, every time I think about it, it's like, you're looking through these rose-colored glasses, hon, because your lifestyle.
I had a friend in grad school, and God bless her. This is who I need to dedicate my next book to, because I remember saying, well, I'm just going to finish my PhD, but I don't know that I'm going to teach with it because I don't think that that's really what I want to do, and I don't know that I'll do anything in academics. But I need to finish because I started it. And she just looked at me just right in the eyes and said, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard.
Why would you do that?
Waste all this time doing a PhD. And I'm like,
just so you can be
and it kind of clicked something in my head. And I was like, she's right. Like, this is not something that you go keep pushing forward and keep collecting debt, so that you can have a PhD you're not going to use. So
right.
Emily, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
She's a tenured professor now. She was in it for the.
She has goals.
She knew what she wanted to do, and she was like, "Why are you going to do that? That's dumb." I'm like, "You're right. It is stupid."
I mean, you've got to listen to her. She's a tenured professor. Yeah,
you know what
she should know. Oh boy, but yeah, we could talk about that all day because I'm about to be up to my eyeballs in final assignments in a less than a
Girl,
week.
I don't even.
Uh,
I mean, now I just have to randomly ask you though that you've read some Allie Hazelwood though. Have you
I
read
have
Allie Hazelwood yet?
not, and
Because I just read my
I
first
wanted
Allie
to.
Hazelwood, and as a former academic, like there are academics that are kind of like, this would never happen in grad school. I'm like, yeah, because it's a romance novel in grad school. But also
Exactly.
like the like vibe of the anxiety of the grad student, like this is like she's a science grad student. It didn't matter. I was like, yes, I understand all of this. Yes, imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
But I mean, I was here for it. I was like, this is awesome.
Yeah.
So you got to pick up some Allie Hazelwood now because yeah, I love
Definitely,
the love
definitely
hypothesis. I
will.
loved it.
Yes, and and it's been to me is it's also nerdy romance to me. So I've had
Mhm.
it on my to be read list. I'm on my TBR for
Hmm.
like
It's
ever.
like a weird like trope that doesn't come off that often because you see like new adult with college students. I want grad students or professors.
Right.
Like I'm not going to be able to say no. Discovery of Witches. We're going to spend the first three chapters in a library. Sign me up.
Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. Oh yes, yes. All of this. But yeah, let's talk get back to Filthy Rich. Let's talk Filthy Rich Vampires first because
Okay.
that's of course where I fell in love with your work. And of course because you mentioned Twilight. So did Twilight I'm assuming Twilight is did you read how about I ask this? Did you read Twilight first or did
Oh, of
you
course I
look at
did.
the movie first?
I read Twilight before the movie. I
Okay.
remember when the movie was going to come out. And I was a young mom and I was in grad school when Twilight came out or when the movie came out. Like Twilight, like I think it had been out for a couple of years before the movie
Yes.
started to come out, but then
Yes.
everyone started talking about it, and then everyone was kind of talking about their love of it. And I was on sort of a chat board with other moms, other young moms, and they were all obsessed. And I was like, okay, I'm going to try reading these books. But I actually had another grad student friend. I owe my grad student friends like so much actually in my career because I remember this. She was an older woman that had come back to school and she was like reading these books in the grad student lounge and being like, these are amazing books. And I was like, really? They're like young adult or the teenager vampire books.
Right.
Like, apparently I didn't learn my lesson because I think I said the same thing about Harry Potter to my husband in college when he was reading them all night long. It's like, those are kids' books. What are you? Yeah, same ending of the story is me binging these books and like being like, what place in town would be open right now? Because I finished book three and I immediately need to start book four at 2 o'clock in the morning. But I did read those books before the movies came out, and I always credit those books with sort of saving my life because I was in grad school. We'd had our first son, and then I had a series of constant like I don't even remember now if it was three or four miscarriages, like boom, boom, boom.
Wow.
And so Twilight became this place for me where like they had these big, huge problems with vampires and werewolves and but that like first love, that the whole world just became a place that I escaped to. And so they meant something to me that I think like they just will always hold a special place in my heart. Like we can talk till we're blue in the face about writing and technical like and all
Mhm.
of that stuff. But at the end of the day, those books captured like some visceral emotions that I don't and gave me a safe place that I will forever be grateful for.
And so that's what kind of led you to want to do the adult version?
A little bit. Like
Or
it really
it took a
wasn't on
minute?
my radar at all. Yeah, it really, cause so that would have been, that's like 2008,
Yeah, somewhere around that. Mm-hmm.
2009. Yeah, probably, I think it would have been around, it would have been, yeah, it would have been 2008 and 2009 that I was reading those. And it was not on my radar that I was going to write this type of book. obviously, like, and at the time, but then I became kind of a young adult fan for a while. Like, oh, I'm going to keep reading young adult,
Mm-hmm.
and it transitioned into dystopian, which is how I wound up writing a dystopian series. But it was after I had written Royals, and after I met my second agent, that I said I started having these crazy ideas about bringing vampires into that world, and my team at the time was just like, do it separately. And I was like, oh, I'm just gonna dabble with it. I'm just gonna play with it. It would be like sexy Twilight, like if 50 Shades of Grey had had vampires instead of billionaires, right? And I just sat and played with it for a really long time. So I would say that, I mean, there was almost a 10-year period, not quite, more like 8 years between me reading Twilight and then coming back and saying, you know what, I think we can write vampires again. I
Yeah.
think I want to write vampires. And then it was a lot of years before I did it. So,
I love how, though, that the world kind of percolated in your mind for so long, and you can actually tell that in the books because they're so rich. I can see these places and not just, yeah, I've been to San Francisco. No, I see these places that you've created in these books, especially that wonderful, lovely Paris apartment. Please tell me. Please tell me that's a real place.
it is based on a real place. It is based on a real apartment that was for sale. My favorite thing. I love real estate porn. Oh, I love it.
Yes.
And remember when everyone during the pandemic was like, yeah, I've been doing that for years. But one of my favorite things to do when you're writing, especially because I always have that sort of like niche of like the aristocratic, the billionaire, the like, so I go
Mm-hmm.
in and I look wherever I'm setting a book, I go in and I start looking what's the most expensive real estate in the area and find a house a house, an estate, a castle that I loosely base whatever it is on so that
Mm-hmm.
I can actually pull the like blueprints because a lot of times they'll give you a blueprint or a 3D walkthrough for those kind of like high
Right.
end.
Exactly.
And so when I'm writing, I know that I'm walking out of this room and going downstairs, like exactly like where it is all
Right.
laid out, like which is very theatrical of me. I did theater in high school. I like that setting component. So yeah, the
Yeah.
Paris apartment is based on a real Paris apartment.
Wow.
And I wish I owned it, but I can't afford it.
Did you have you ever been to Paris?
Oh
Yeah. Okay.
yeah,
Okay. So
definitely.
this
There,
is this is my
I
thing.
have a
Have you
very
seen it?
loose rule that I have to have gone
Okay.
somewhere to write about it. That's not entirely true. There are a couple places I haven't been to, but I try to go if I'm going to put it in something. So
So
I've not seen that Paris
okay,
apartment,
that's what I was going to
unfortunately.
ask you. Have you
Yeah.
seen that Paris apartment? You
No,
just
I've
seen it in
stayed
the
in some Paris apartments, Airbnbs and things like that through the years, but not one that fancy.
yeah. Nice.
Someday. We got to
Right.
sell a few more books, so I'll buy one.
It's just, oh wow. I was just like, okay, I'm transported and I'm loving this, and I need to find some plane ticket money and get on a plane and go.
Yeah, yeah.
It was
There's so many
amazing.
places in those books that are real places you can go. Like, so, I mean, you could, I'm guessing it's not still on the market, that particular Paris
Right,
apartment,
right.
but, there's all of these other, Gallery Lafayette. That's a real place you can shop. You can really have personal shopping experience. You can really go to the tea shop that's there that they sit down and have tea. Like,
Right.
so I always try to add in these real places in the real world and that you could go to and experience that for yourself
Wow.
just because I mean like book tourism is like
It's a
I've done
thing.
all the Harry Potter spelling
Exactly.
locations, like yeah, like I just you
Yeah.
could do that if you wanted.
Yeah,
You
it's a
could go to
total
my
thing.
Paris, you could go to my London, you could go to these places.
Yeah.
A lot of them.
And you mentioned dystopia, and I know that's not the best place to best place to live, or best place to be in. But yeah, they do Hunger Games tours here, so I'm in the Hunger Games film kind of sort of area. I'm out little outside of that area because some of it they did in Georgia, but some of it they did in North Carolina mountains, and yeah, they have
Yeah.
book tours
I
and
could
stuff.
totally see that though. Like when I think about those movies and I've
Mm-hmm.
been in North Carolina mountains, you can see that.
Yeah, yeah.
There's
So
so much filming that goes on down around you though. Like that whole area just
yes.
yeah.
Oh gosh, yes. It's all over. But now that we're talking about this, I'm thinking, wow, wouldn't it be cool to have a Filthy Rich Vampires movie series? Wouldn't
Can't talk
it?
about
Oh
that.
my gosh.
I
I'm just
wouldn't
gonna put it out in the ether. How about I do that?
you could you put it it's in the either girl. Um no they it's one of those I think it's like I think we're all supposed to like have this really like rehearsed thing where we're like that would be great all authors about everything Hollywood is
It is.
its own thing and I always say if I'm walking the red I'll be excited if I'm walking the red carpet someday. And that's the moment I'll be truly
Right,
excited.
right, exactly.
Until that moment, because I've
Right.
watched, I've been in this industry for well over a decade, and I started in YA, which means
Hmm.
that I know everyone in YA. So I've watched so much of that develop over the
Yep.
years, and like this project is going to happen, and then it fizzles, and so
Exactly.
I mean, I definitely. You're not the only one that would be excited about Filthy Rich Vampire or Filthy Rich Fae, and I hope that I can talk more about that someday.
I hope
I
you.
hope that something comes of it.
Yes, I hope you
We'll just
can
find
too.
out.
I hope you can
Yeah.
too. I'm not gonna lie. I fan cast my books. These people are
Oh,
probably
yeah.
not
Oh,
gonna.
I so want to know who you chose then, because I always feel like I'm hitting like a certain age where I no longer know, like, well, what is like, I'm like, well, that person, 20 years ago, but that person would be
Exactly. It's
great.
like, okay, yeah, this
It's
person
not
is
how
not
time
gonna work.
works.
Yeah. Right.
You would have been fantastic.
Yeah.
20 years younger. Yeah, yeah.
Right.
I've definitely been like, I don't know. I don't know who the youngins are that are out there filming stuff anymore.
Right. Right, exactly. But whether or not it does get into the movie verse or the TV verse, I'm just making these words up right now. I love the series, and I will say this: I'm not really a an alpha males person, but I like your alpha males. Now, part of this probably has to do with the fact that they're vampires and they're fae, and okay. And again, I haven't read the royal series yet, but even with royals have a certain distance, right?
Yeah,
So we can we get that these people can be alpha, you know,
right.
in
Exactly,
that
exactly.
in
Well,
that
I
space.
definitely really love the concept of like the cinnamon roll alpha, the alpha that is actually like very emotionally attuned and
Yeah.
really treats his significant other like a queen, like
Yes.
and respects her. And when he doesn't, that she feels safe enough to feel like she can demand that respect. That's
Yes.
really important to me because I want them to be equally matched in terms of strength of personality. But I like it. I like I love a I will say character. I guess I love a man that's very comfortable in his masculinity, and that bleeds into like, oh, well, yeah, like my alpha males are this type of guys that will sit down and have a tea party with their daughter because that does not in any way, shape, or form undermine their masculinity. They
Right.
know they know that they're gonna walk in and be like confident and a powerful man in a room, but they also know that their wife is gonna walk in and be confident and a powerful woman in the room, or their significant other or their girlfriend. They're drawn to that same level of strength. And I think that's why it doesn't grade as much sometimes with my alpha males don't come off as strongly alpha as some do because they're very attracted to that same strong heroine. But I like an alpha male. It's just someone who knows what they want.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, and all stories are kind of to some extent someone trying to figure out what they want, someone trying to go after what they want. So these are just characters that generally feel pretty confident in a situation. And there's something sexy about that.
Right.
There just is,
Yeah. Right.
I don't think it's like the alpha male of like the 80s that you'd see in like an old action movie, right?
Right.
Like, I'm great with a gun and like throw back a drink and I'm a man's man. Like, these are just very emotionally aware men that are still deeply flawed, but are fairly confident.
Yeah. Yeah.
Despite those flaws.
I totally feel all of that. And I think that's why I'm drawn to your alphas, because they like, or they're attracted to a heroine that's not going to shy away from them. Because I also love a heroine that is kind of owning her own stuff. Now, she might have some issues.
Yeah.
But she's owning her own stuff. And then the guy, too, he might have some issues as well, but he's owning his own stuff. And I like the fact that there is that kind of a mutual respect that goes on between the couple. It's not a relationship where it's like, this is really out of sync, this guy's really alpha and he's really domineering and he's really, that kind of alpha male tends to put me off a little bit. And I guess that's why I gravitate towards your characters, and especially Lachlan Gage, who's our Fae in Filthy Rich Fae, who was our MMC Fae in Filthy Rich Fae. He is a Fae prince, and he is yummy delicious.
He is. He's my current book boyfriend, because of course I'm knee deep in writing book 2 right now.
Oh,
and he is very delicious. Yeah, I love him, and he is, in a lot of ways, he's probably I'm saying this after writing Julian, who will rip a heart out without thinking about it. Julian is a vampire, so I feel like that makes it okay.
Exactly. He's okay with it.
You guys, he has almost 1,000 years of experience. He knows when a heart has to be ripped out. I don't know what to tell you. They deserve it. He doesn't just randomly do it. But, after writing him, I was like, and then Lachlan came along, and he is like my most morally gray character. And I love playing with shades of morally gray, but he's definitely... They're all morally gray. I don't think anyone crosses into anti-hero territory. I don't really write anti-heroes, but like one character that it kind of, and even he doesn't. In the end, he turns out to be a cinnamon roll alpha. They all turn out to be cinnamon roll alphas.
I'm
all
like,
yes, I will rip your heart out, but also,
yeah,
you should go shopping and take care of yourself. I'm like, yes, you should.
I am loving this term, this cinnamon roll alpha term. I'm loving that.
Yeah, because you're like, oh yeah, you got this gooey, warm, like soft interior that you show to some people.
Yeah.
I'm married to a cinnamon roll alpha. So when that term, like when I first started hearing that, I was like, oh, I've been writing alphas for years. I was like, that's what they are. Like, click.
That's it. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. And Lachlan totally is. But to me, for him to be morally gray and for him to be a fae, that makes sense to me.
Yeah. Well, of course, they operate under different, they're all operating under different rules than humans are. Right. So, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I see Julian as, he's a little bit colder than Lachlan is, right? But then he's vampire, and Julian's vampire, and Lachlan is fae. So to me, with the fae, I see mischievous. I see, we're going to do a few little underhanded things, but that's because we're fae, right?
Right.
But
what are you going to do? I'm fae.
Yeah, exactly.
This is just what we do.
This is how we are. But I will say this. I love Kate so much. I love her so much. And even though she's got things going on, she's got issues going on. I love her resilience. I love her little attitude that she's got. She's like, I'm not gonna take any gruff from you. And I'm just really gonna just put all this back on you. You're gonna come at me with some mess. I'm gonna come back at you with some mess. I love that.
Yeah, she dishes it right back to him. Yeah.
It's so awesome. And there are a couple of times though I'm like, ooh, maybe we shouldn't have said that.
I know. She said something like, okay. Okay. She obviously feels fairly secure.
Right.
But she's such a unique character, because she was the character that was kind of like the one that was really eluding me for the longest when I went to write. And yeah, and I always say my characters, they show up when they're ready for the story to get started.
Mm-hmm.
And so I might dabble. I'm not going to force it. If there are no characters showing up, then we don't have a scene. They are going to show up and be the person they want to be. And they, well, really, her and Locke both, like, you've read the book. It's not going to surprise you that they have very secretive personalities. And so she's very protective of herself for really good reason. So it just took her, like, I talk about them like they're real people, because in my head they really do kind of functionally act as real people. It's
you've
creepy.
written them like real
but
people.
Yeah,
we see them
but
too.
She took this really long time to show up and was very guarded. And I would be writing these scenes and be like, "Who are you? Tell me who you are." And I had to really sit with her as a character for a long time before it felt like whatever universal creative force trusted me enough to be like, "Here she is. This is who she is, and this is why she's guarded." And it just made me love her more, because she is so real. I think she feels like someone that we all know, someone who's had the kind of trauma that so many of us have experienced. And,
exactly. Yeah.
But who would be strong enough when put in this situation to go toe to toe with someone that could kill her,
right.
like very easily.
Right. And think nothing of it.
Yeah. And she's just like, no, she's got this. She's a survivor. She's very much a survivor.
Yeah.
And I love that about her. Like, I just relate to her in a way that, I don't play favorites. I love all of my characters, but I really related to Kate in a way that is very deep and profound. So
yeah. Which is why it totally doesn't surprise me what she did in the end. Y'all are just gonna have to read this book. Okay? Y'all are gonna have to read this book. You're going to be like, OMG, like I did. I just yelled it out. I was just like, OMG! I was like, oh gosh, why? But at the same time, you're not surprised because of who she is. She's very true to her character. And that is a testament to how you've written all of these characters. I mean, they're just so interesting. You just want to be like, I just want to be in this world, And
I love found family. That's probably my number one trope. And so I always want it to be a world that you want to be in, that these are people that you want to be friends with, that you wish you were having a holiday dinner with.
Yeah.
That's my particular catnip.
Yes. And two, it doesn't surprise me that this is set in New Orleans either, because to me, that whole, like, everything that happens here and the setting just all come together. It's almost like, how Sex and the City and New York come together. It all just comes together like that, and
oh yeah, and I just love New Orleans. It's such an evocative place. Like, with this whole, they're not the same series. Vampires is technically, but it's a shared world, right? Like, and so it was really fun to go into cities that I love and like reimagine them as like magical hotspots.
Yeah.
That's got to be the most fun thing I've ever done. Like, I thought it was fun back when it would just be like I was figuring out the best place to go shopping in London. Right? But it's like really fun to be like, let's pretend there's an entire magical world and this is where they hang out.
Yeah.
So,
but yeah, I I mean, I could totally even see it though. You could. It's almost like you can feel a little bit of magic that in New Orleans. It
Yeah.
feels magic just being there.
Oh yeah, it does. There's that old world, the French Quarter, the cemeteries,
Yeah.
you still feel this sense of like the old voodoo and hoodoo and
Yes.
this all
Yeah.
this melting pot of cultures that happened there a long time before it was happening anywhere else
Right.
in the country. Like, yeah, it's just a very evocative place.
It
My
is.
husband keeps saying he hasn't been there yet, and I've gone
Oh,
twice. And so I
to
keep
go.
thinking, oh, clearly we need to go for another like
That's right.
writing, like, oh, so it's
Exactly.
just gonna go and get some writing juju in. Yeah.
That's it. So before we leave the Filthy Rich series is that's not a thing series. There's the obvious question and the obvious play on another series, and was this something that obviously now that we know kind of where Filthy Rich Vampires kind of the inspo kind of came from, it kind of takes and two, because the series is nothing like Crazy Rich Asians, right?
Right.
But
Yeah.
you kind of think when you first go into this, is this Crazy Rich Asians but vampires? And it's not.
Right.
But did any of that come into play when the title was being considered? Was that did you have any say in that or
I
any?
did. So I came up with the title Filthy Rich Vampire. It was originally the working title for years of that project, Filthy Rich Vampire, was Midnight. And so I referenced it as Midnight. We talked about it as Midnight.
Mm-hmm.
And I still love that title, like,
Yeah.
because it is such a play on like Twilight, but not.
Yes. Yes.
And for a lot of reasons, because there are so many paranormals that have Midnight in the title and things like that, we didn't go with that. But the actual reason that I wound up with Filthy Rich Vampire was that I did something different with this series. I had been polling my readers for years and saying, what are you most interested in reading from me next on Facebook and newsletters, things like that. And it was like another Royals book, and this book, a book set here, vampires, a book set here. And vampires was always the one that came in, like, if not dead last, because I'd always throw something really random on there that my readers would not expect from me, like sports romance. Like, I'm not the
Right.
person to write this. Good on you. I'm not that one. Nobody wants me to write that.
Yeah.
But vampires was always the thing that came in like close to dead last. But it was a passion project of mine and have been for years, right? Like I'm doing all these notes. I'm like, how am I ever going to get anyone to switch over from contemporary to reading vampires? And I wrote this series. I wrote all of the vampire books as a Kindle Vella, which is their new serial platform,
Mm-hmm.
because I wanted to do something fun. I wanted to do something different. I am neurodivergent, so it was like a really fun, unique way to be writing consistently and frequently and kind of getting that like having mini deadlines and having mini releases where I knew I'm dropping an episode this week that's going to blow everyone's minds and everyone's going to be like, I can't believe you just did that.
Mm-hmm.
When's the next episode? And so when I decided I was going to do the serial, I was coming off the experience of having had the Royals books were on Radish for a long time. They had licensed it from me. They came to me and said, we'd like to put them up there. And they basically handled all of that, but it accumulated something like 28 million reads on Radish.
Wow.
And they only called it The Royals. And I learned something from that. I learned something from that, and I learned something from my German publisher who loves to lean into the trope in the title. And I thought, well, I did a little like market research and I was like, what if we called it Filthy Rich Vampire? And everyone was like kind of not sure because they're like, but people are going to like dismiss it as not being very serious. And actually, they're pretty serious books. Like
Yes.
like
Yeah.
they're not really genre, niche genre. And I was like, I just think there's something to it. So we ran test ads that just led to a page called Filthy Rich Vampire, and it was blowing everything out. Everyone was like, they saw that title and were like, yes.
Wow.
And so I ran that. I wrote that Vella as Filthy Rich Vampires on Amazon, on Amazon's Kindle Vella, and it was one of the top serials for like the entire 18 months that I was writing it on there. It was in the top five almost the entire time. So I was just like, clearly the title works. Like,
Yeah.
even though Kate, I see a lot of reviews, like people will say, like, this is not what I was expecting when I picked up a book called Filthy Rich Vampire. And it's always like
Yeah.
a good thing. They're like, this is like way better than I thought it would be. I'm like, well, thank you, I guess. I don't like, I'm thrilled that you
Yeah, right, exactly.
but that's, you know, where it kind of came from. And I was publishing those books and I was publishing them myself because I've been publishing myself for years and years and
Hmm.
only doing traditional publishing with foreign publishers and like audio. I let my audio be published a lot of times for me. I don't have that bandwidth. But I got a call from Liz Pelletier, who is the CEO of Entangled.
Hmm.
And she said, first of all, she was upset because she was like, I wish I had come up with Filthy Rich Vampires. That's really smart. And then she was like, Filthy Rich Fae, what do you think? And I'm like, what is that? Because I've been building
Wow.
out this whole world that it actually kind of stayed away from Fae. Because I was like, I don't know that I want to take it down the Fae. Like, Fae's very popular in romantasy. And she's
Yeah.
like, I just think that we could write a killer book called Filthy Rich Fae, or that you could write a killer book called Filthy Rich Fae. And it just spun out from there. We just leaned into it. We're like, okay, we're gonna have filthy rich werewolves, we're gonna have filthy rich gods, we're gonna
Yeah,
have
right.
filthy rich everything, right?
Yeah.
And my only request was basically all of them have to have multiple books because I personally try. I think we'll get to the point with Filthy Rich Vampires where it spins into the brothers, and those are really long standalone books.
Hmm.
But when I'm setting up this new world, this new species, if you will, like I want to have multiple books so that I can really
Right.
tell the backstory of those characters and really give you like
Yeah.
build that world out for. So that's now we have Filthy Rich everything.
Yes. And we're loving
But
it.
that's how it started, was just
Wow.
like me being like, I'm gonna write this serial and I want people to want to check it out. So
Wow.
we came up with Filthy Rich Vampire in a fit of we had like four different working titles and it was clearly the winner. So
Yeah.
yeah.
That that is really interesting. I love the this is my marketing brain going off. I love the yeah, you
I
did a
love
page and
marketing
you
brain. Like
tested.
you
Ah,
know, and I'm the worst because I'll be like, I'm gonna write this book and it's gonna have an anti-hero or whatever, and then it always inevitably kind of gets back to my style and my vibe and
mm-hmm.
walks back from that.
Yeah.
But I
But
think
it's
that that's one of the things after a decade that I've learned the most is know your tropes, know what
yeah.
you're, and then play to them. Tropes sell books,
Yeah.
and it's if you don't if you have so much money and you're so set up in life that you can just write for the utter joy of it and never have to think about making a book sale, then I'm jealous.
Me
But
too.
I am here to support my family, and I'm so lucky that I get to do something I love.
Yeah.
That means I have to be smart about
Exactly.
it.
Exactly. That's
So,
exactly
yeah.
it. Oh my gosh, I love this. This is so awesome. I'm learning, y'all. I'm learning some stuff too. Ah, this is great. But with every guest that I have on, guest author or guest interview that I do a little rapid fire round.
Oh, here
So,
we go.
so can we do a little rapid fire round before we
We can
go?
do it. Let's see how much of my brain power my children have stolen from me then. Maybe less rapid fire, more like pretty quick.
Okay, all right. The pretty quick round.
The pretty quick round.
Okay, so we might have talked about this one already, but it might not be what I'm thinking. The first romance you read and you thought, I want to write that.
This is this is gonna be a weird answer.
Okay.
Buckle up. I would say, argue that the first romance that I really read that like stuck with me and put me on the path. I would argue it's the Anne of Green Gables series.
Oh my gosh.
that I read so much when I was a kid because it's like her whole life, and she meets Gilbert Blythe and like the first, and then boom, 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 and it's like 8 books.
Yeah.
And I've read those books so many times I can't even talk about it, but it shows you her whole life from meeting the guy that she hates, it's enemies
Yes.
to lovers, cause her furious, to becoming friends with him, to him telling her that he's in love, like, and
Yes.
so then eventually getting married and having kids. Like, I loved that. I loved going in on this whole long journey. And I think that that's reflective of how I write romance because I often don't stop when they get married. If I can, I will continue the series because I think there's a whole different level of romance there. But it's
Yeah.
got to be Anne of Green Gables. That was the one where I was just like, this, there's something here. And I was
Yeah.
young, like second grade,
Right.
but I knew I kind of wanted to be a writer from that point on.
Oh wow.
And yeah.
And that's what you wanted to write. That's amazing.
I was gonna write things like that. Yeah.
So you kind of answered this earlier, but maybe not exactly. Best book boyfriend that you wrote.
Oh, am I supposed to choose? I have a harem. Just gonna call
Okay, so she's
Spice.
in a why choose situation here. Okay.
I'm gonna why choose. I truly like. I joke with my husband, but it's actually a real thing that when I'm writing characters and I'm writing a love story, which I'm always writing a love story in some way, shape, or form, that I have an actual visceral moment where I realize that like I'm in love with this character. Like I feel like the feeling, like that feeling when
Yes.
you're like, oh, I'm in love with this person. Like I get to that point with the relationship and with the characters and with the love
Yeah.
interest specifically. And so I literally am in love with every single one of these men in a different way. And they all have a little bit of my husband in them, some little teeny thing
That's so
that is like
cute.
clearly my husband coming through. So I
Oh,
guess like I guess what I always say is the one I'm writing right now.
yes.
Because it's like the one I'm in. So it's
Yeah.
Lachlan right now because I'm deep into it with Lachlan right now. We're having trysts and
Yeah.
I'm sneaking away from family functions and that kind of thing. So I
Oh
guess
wow.
so it's Lachlan.
Yep. I see that. Your best book boyfriend that you didn't write, if you have one.
No, it's just hard.
It's hard.
It's hard. I love Reese from Akatar, and I really love Matthew de Clermont from Discovery of Witches. Those are probably my like top two that I didn't write. Yeah.
So
I want to go
awesome.
with those two. Yeah.
Cool.
I collect those two. I have a very large harem.
You do.
They're all fictional, so I
Yeah.
don't think it's
So
cheating.
it's cool. It's totally cool. Your okay. What is your nerdy guilty pleasure? So I'm going to kind of elaborate on what nerdy is. So it can be your fantasy sci-fi kind of a pleasure, or it can be nerdy as in I like some nerdy little thing or some geeky little thing. But I'll say here we're about nerd pop culture. So we're all into the fantasy sci-fi superhero kind of worlds. So do you have
I am a big nerd. When my husband and I went on our first date in 1997, so we've been together since I was 15 years old. We spent the entirety of that first day. We went out to eat and then we saw the movie Titanic opening weekend. We've been around a long time. We had a fight over which one of us was a bigger Star Wars nerd. And I like basically knew like he's the one. Like I was like, it is clearly me. And
right?
he's like, I've read the technical manual. I was like, you read fake science. Good for you. Like
Oh my gosh.
build me a spaceship, I'll be impressed. But yeah, so I'm like a huge nerd. So it's just so hard for me because like I love Doctor Who. I love Doctor Who. I really love Star Trek. I am hugely into a lot of very nerdy things. Like, and I'm huge. I know it's like I'm a huge Harry Potter fan, and I know there's some problematic stuff with that now. And I tend to think I love the books. I love the cast. And I'm not gonna. I learned the lesson a long time ago. One of my favorite books growing up was Ender's Game. And Orson Scott Card might be one of the most problematic authors ever, but I still love
Yeah.
those books. That book like really, really meant something to me. So I'm a huge sci-fi nerd. That's the biggest shock because I think that people would be like, "What?"
Right.
Like all sci-fi. Love it.
All
Love
right.
sci-fi. Live for sci-fi.
I'm
Love it.
loving this. You're talking to a Trekkie right now. I'm
Oh
loving
yeah.
this.
Oh
Oh
yeah.
my.
And oh my God, the new we have 4-year-old can't watch anything and focus. We've been
Right.
watching the new Star Trek series. How freaking hot is that captain? It's almost like I'm like, it's kind of weird.
Yes.
Like can you be too handsome? He might be too handsome. Like I kind of have struggled to watch him, but I kind of want to anyway. It's like a
Yes.
car wreck.
Yes. All over that.
Yeah, loving that, loving the vibe of that new, like feels like it's getting back to old Star Trek.
Yeah.
You know,
It
because I was a
really
TNG nerd. I
does.
grew up with
Yeah,
TNG,
that's
and
me.
that's,
Yeah, that's me. I'm a
yeah,
TNG.
yeah,
Yeah, that's how
was
it started.
obsessed with Wesley Crusher, one of my first crushes
Yes.
ever. Yeah.
Oh gosh, we totally could we could talk Star
Yeah.
Trek all day. Whether you come or not, it's okay. But I'm gonna invite you in if we have the next Star Trek episode that we have. I'm gonna invite you
Oh,
down.
yeah.
You
Yeah,
know I'm gonna
totally,
invite you down.
totally. Yeah, we both love it. My
Awesome.
husband and I just absolutely obsessed.
Oh,
So
this is
I
great.
grew up with it,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Oh my
I
gosh.
think we became more Star Trek fans too as we got like we were always huge Star Wars nerds, and then like as
Yeah,
we get older, the nuance of Star Trek really starts to appeal to you in a different way. Like that's
it
how I want the world
does.
to be.
It
You
does.
know, like
It kind of works
I'm a
its
little bit of an
way.
idealist. Yeah.
Yeah, it kind of works its way in there. And yeah, again, I could go all day about this, but
Mhm.
I won't. We're going to end it on this wonderful note. Oh my gosh. So, Geneva, tell us where to find you if you're on the socials or the internets.
I am on social. I am on social. I'm not like, and I'm like, if you're like, I can't handle following anyone else on social, well, I'm not going to overwhelm you. Because I'm definitely like, I'm the older going, maybe a little less of this. So I'm on TikTok. I think it's the Geneva Lee because someone stole Geneva Lee out from underneath me on TikTok. And then I'm on Instagram and Facebook as Geneva Lee Books. And I'm on Threads. And actually, I'm kind of really enjoying like low key. Threads is kind of reminding me of like the early days of Twitter before
Mm-hmm.
what it is now.
Yes.
Yeah, so that's kind of nice too. I get on there and just kind of randomly spout nonsense throughout the day. But I'm around.
All
But I
right.
also have a very healthy, I've got to be writing some books and raising 3 humans. Raising 3 humans is a lot of work.
That is a lot of work. That is a lot of work.
So, yeah.
And obviously with Filthy Rich Fae, we'll be able to find it everywhere. Is it going to be in audio?
Yes. Yeah, they're recording. I'm really hoping they're recording it right now, so I'm really hoping it's going to be a simultaneous release. And then, of course, the first print run of Filthy Rich Fae, it's actually a limited print run, will have the beautiful sprayed edges. So it's probably, those
Ooh.
have been like
Yes.
anytime you do a spray, you want to jump in on that. As so, yeah. So it should, and those will be available in stores. Pre-ordering guarantees it, but they'll have the sprayed edges in stores too. So it's supposed to be in Walmart and Target and Barnes Noble and everywhere. So
Oh, nice.
yeah,
Oh my
yeah, it's
gosh.
crazy. Totally crazy. It's crazy to see your books in Target.
I,
I feel
I
like
bet
Target's finally
it
giving
is.
something back to me.
Finally.
Like I've been giving it so much money for years.
And
Finally.
especially when you just go in there and you're like, I just need, a pack of gum, or I just need this one little thing. Next thing you know, you're coming out there with a cart full.
Yeah,
Yeah.
always, always, always spending $100 at
Oh
Target. It's
gosh.
like a law.
And now part of that
So,
$100 is going to be Filthy Rich Fae, y'all. Make sure you put
yep.
it in your carts. wherever your carts are, whether it's Target or Barnes and Noble or wherever. You've got to pick up this book. It may be pre-order by the time we put this out, but it may already be in stores by the time we put this out.
Yeah, because that's June 25th.
Yeah.
So,
yes, we are excited for its release. I'm excited for book 2 already because...
Me too.
I love this.
Write in itself. No. I'm needy.
But yes, but no pressure at all because we are just loving this book 1, and I'm going to get back to the Filthy Rich Vampire series. And now, y'all, I've got to read the Royal series. Okay, I'm just totally hooked.
It's a long one.
So you've got time. Geneva Lee, it was so nice to meet you and have you on Nerdy Romantics.
Thank you for having me on and talking about nerdy stuff. We always talk about romance tropes, but I think a lot of us are nerds.
Yes.
Yeah.
We totally are. And now I'm going to invite you back for our nerdy episodes. Yeah, we got to invite you back for those. I will
be there for that. There's few nerdy things that I can't talk. I can't talk about video games. That's the only line I've ever drawn in my life. I'm like, no, I don't need to suck away my whole life with a video game.
Yeah, I have a healthy respect for gamers. And
yeah, me, fantastic. And what do they say? Every reader is married to a gamer. I totally am. My husband totally games. I just that's my line.
Yeah. But yeah, we'll definitely have you back. No gaming talk, but definitely some Star Trek talk. Now that I know you're a Trekkie, we've got to have you back for that. Thank you for being on.
Thank you so much.
While that's the end of our discussion, it's not the end of the story. Check out my website at nerdyromanticspodcast.com. And while you're there, sign up for my newsletter to get show notes of the episodes in your inbox. And if you want to see me, my guests, and my guest co-hosts on video, please subscribe to my YouTube channel at youtube.com/author YM Nelson. Thanks for listening and for watching.